Hello, chess family. It's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're taking a look at our instructive chess miniatures. Now, today you are in for a treat because we're going to be taking a look at Botvinnik's system whenever he likes to play the isolated pawn. Now, a lot of people, especially experienced chess players, do not like isolated pawn, which is something I did actually some good research into, and I'll probably be doing a series on it at some point. With that being said, you should be playing isolated pawn and giving yourself the isolated pawn, okay? It's a very good way to play. Some of the best chess players in history love to play the isolated pawn, such as Karpov, which not a lot of people would think of because, well, he was known as a strategic chess master, right? He was known as a positional player. Here we got Botvinnik doing the exact same thing, giving themselves the isolated pawn and getting themselves into nice aggressive positions. Well, let's get a master instruction here about how to play the isolated pawn. And, well, if it's a miniature, it must be good. Here we go. We started off with c4, e6. Of course, this is the English. Although with black playing e6 here, it's very common that they can transpose into a d4 opening. And knight f3 gets played. Pawn d5, pawn d4. Now we're switching over to a queen's gambit. Knight f6, bishop g5, bishop b7, knight c3, castles. This looks very much like the queen's gambit now. Pawn to e3, and knight b to d7. A very important position in these kind of queen's gambits, and well, just almost the beginning of it. Here, Botvinnik wastes no time. He just goes ahead and plays bishop to d3. Now, this is already a new way of playing because, remember, back in some of the old games, white would typically fight over losing the tempo of bishop d3. They play rook c1 here, they play a3 here, they go queen c2. They just don't want to move the bishop because, well, after bishop d3, your opponent is going to go ahead and take. Bishop takes, and you've lost the tempo there. That was a big theoretical discussion for a long time. Here, Botvinnik says, you know what? If you want to do it, just do it. And I do the exact same thing in a few of my lines because I play the isolated pawn. In this game, though, after bishop d3, black says, you know what? I don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and try this other move, pawn c5, which is basically saying I want some equality here. D takes c4. White is still slightly better in those lines. But with c5 here, if this goes well, black should be equal, if not better. Remember, d4 is the point that controls the center here. So if they're able to take, they can at least create an isolated pawn so they can fight against. All right, the game continued. Here, you know, Botvinnik is more than happy with this. He just goes in castles. And here, Vidmar, who's playing with the black pieces, just goes ahead and says, you know what, I'm going to give you that weak pawn. So pawn takes on d4. Pawn takes on d4. Notice here, knight takes d4. Well, if you play knight takes d4, and this happens in a lot of games, yes, white will not have any weaknesses, right? With that being said, you cannot claim any advantages. Typically, what will happen is these pawns will exchange at some point. Either they'll take or you'll take, and then the pawn structure is pretty much the same. There's nothing different about it, so it's an equal game. So if white wants to play for the win, you have to play e takes d4, and Botvinnik is all about this. Here we go. Pawn takes, bishop takes, knight to b6. It looks like black's doing a great job because, well, for those of you who don't know, whenever you're playing against isolated pawn, black is trying to trade down into an endgame because, well, isolated pawns are going to be very easy. In fact, theoretically, the king and pawn endgame should be lost. With that being said, white, because they have the isolated pawn, they have a few more squares in the center, meaning, well, they should probably go for an attack on the king. How does that work? Well, if you play a standard game of chess here, you always have this weakness, right? So your only advantage here is a little bit of center space, which can convey over to a kingside attack. So that's why white's best idea is to go for kingside attack. If you play a standard game of chess here, you have the weakness, you'll probably get into some trouble here. All right, with that being said, knight b6 is covering the d5 square. Well, anytime there's an isolated pawn, that means there's a weak square in front of it. If you can control this square, you're going to stop the pressure that could be lifted by getting rid of it. So knight b6 not only gets the free tempo off the bishop, but is also controlling the important square of d5. Well, the bishop moved away to b3. Bishop to d7. Black's just playing a good standard game of chess here. You can see that bishop c6 is coming, and look, it looks like black has solved all his opening problems. A nice move here for white. Let's see if you can figure out this move. White to move the queen. Where should you move it to, and why? This is a very basic setup, or very basic idea that white is going to set up here. And this is important because, well, we need to create threats, and we also need to create weaknesses in our opponent's camp. Where did the queen go to? E2, D2, D3, maybe even C2. All right. Hopefully you put pause. Hopefully you figured out the move. Here the queen's going to go to D3. Definitely one of the best squares here. Queen E2 is also another good square to move to, although it gets rid of the idea of why we're going to D3. Queen d2 is okay. Queen c2, I will not award anybody points on this move because you put your queen opposite file of a rook. Not a good idea. All right, so what's the idea of queen d3? Very simple. I want to play bishop c2 to threaten checkmate on h7. The knight's defending, but we can get rid of that knight. But wait a second, won't your opponent see that? Yes, they will. But remember, to get to the next level, it's not enough just to wait for your opponent to make mistakes. We need to start making threats so that they create weaknesses in their game. For instance, I'll just play a simple move here like pawn to a6. Once you play something like bishop c2, now bishop takes is being threatened. Black must make some kind of weakness here. Whether it's playing pawn to g6, which most likely will happen, now you'll see ideas that the dark squares are now weakened, and now we can start attacking them. Again, you have to do something like this, or else your opponent will not make any weaknesses by themselves. You have to provoke weaknesses, meaning making threats. This provokes them to make a weakness, and that's when you can attack. All right, well, back to the game. Black did not play the silly a6 move. Instead, black plays a solid move, knight to b5, knight b to d5. And yeah, this is good. In fact, this is a nice idea because it stops bishop c2 here. All right, bishop c2 would just be a big mistake here. First off, the knight's already defending this one. So what would black play here? Simple chess. Knight b4, getting rid of this light square bishop. This is one of your best attacking pieces. So after trading this guy off, black is all but better in this position, and white will hope for an attack. All right, well, let's keep making moves. Let's keep making threats. Let's keep bettering our position. Knight e5 was played. Of course, the knight, because there's no knight on c6, the knight's going to jump to this square, and also allows the queen some ideas about switching over to the king side to attack white's weakest pawn. All right, bishop c6 gets played. Should we take on c6 here and give them an isolated pawn and maybe go rook a to c1? Or go rook to a to d1 for attacking chances? Which one would you play? Knight takes c6 and then play rook c1 after isolated pawn has been made, or play rook a to d1. All right, hopefully you found the move. What are you playing here? Knight takes c6. Although this is a very good strategic idea, remember, your long-term plan here was to go for kingside attack. So, whenever you switched over to go queenside, well, you made black happy. Remember, you're playing on his side of the board. You're playing his strategy. Here, the position is equal. The other way, though, after you play rook a to d1, white maintains a slight advantage. Remember, we're developing for kingside attack. Don't play their game. You have to play yours. Rook a d1 gets played. Knight to b4. I'm sure that Botvinnik was very happy because he said, how did you know I wanted to move my queen? So the queen moves to a better square. Let's put pressure on this h7 square. What do we play? Queen to h3, a very standard move here. A lot of times the bishop will come to c2, again provoking any kind of weakness. Black played bishop to d5. Again, a move if I'm playing white here, I'd be very happy to see. This light square bishop is definitely one of the worst pieces on the board for black. With that being said, well, it wants to naturally trade itself off for this bishop. If that happens, then again, this is one of the best attacking pieces. You're not going to be too happy. So what do you play here? Of course, knight takes on d5. Knight takes, and now a nice idea here. Now you could play the standard bishop c2 idea, but here there's a good theme to play, especially in these isolated pawn games. Here, you're going to get your last piece into the game active. Last piece. Aren't all my pieces active? Take a look again. This last piece, once it becomes active, the game ends pretty fast here. What do you play? Hopefully you see it. Pawn to f4, a very nice standard attacking move here. The idea? To play pawn f5. We want to try and dislodge. Remember, this is the strong square for black. And also, if we can ever get this pawn going, it might be a good passed pawn for us. So we're trying to get rid of this guy and also open up the rook into the game. This f4, f5 plan is very standard for attacking on the king side whenever you have the isolated pawn. All right, black played rook to c8. Pawn to f5, of course. Pawn takes. This was a major mistake here. Black needs to just kind of maintain over here. After this, the d5 becomes weakened. Well, a beautiful tactic emerges, making this game definitely a gem. Pawn takes, rook takes. Makes sense to me. Maybe we're going to double our rooks over here. And now we have the f-pawn, which is now becoming a target. As you can see, all the pieces are now aiming at it, whether through x-ray version or just looking to move there in the future. Black now plays queen d6. And, well, it's time already. White to move and win. It looks like this position is just impregnable, right? Like, everything looks defended. I don't really see any weaknesses here. But with the trained eye, with those who have played these positions quite a bit, they can already sense the weaknesses, and the game goes sour. There's actually a few winning moves here. computer gives. But Botvinnik, of course, finds the best one. Here we go. What do we play here? Hope we push pause. Hope you look through this. All right, here it is. Knight takes on f7. What a beautiful move. This opens up the pathway, and of course, you can see this bishop is eyeing at this king. If you don't take back, you're just losing. I agree. So rook takes, and here's the idea of this combination. Take a look at this x-ray attack. This queen is now eyeing on this rook. This rook was a little bit overloaded here, trying to defend the rook, and also this guy over here. And now force moves. Bishop takes on f6. Bishop takes on f6. Of course, you can't take back with I mean, you could take back again. This is just not the best. Here, white's move and win. What do you play? Simple chess. We see that this rook is aimed up over here. So rook takes on f6, putting pressure on f7 over here, and also the queen's attacked. The game ends pretty fast here also. With that being said, bishop takes on f6. Rook takes on d5. Queen c6 is played. Remember, guys, when you see a good move, look for a better one. White to move. What do you play here? There's lots of good, strong moves here, but if you play the right one, the game should end pretty fast. All right, I hear someone telling me rook c5 is a very strong move. Look, it's attacking over here, attacking the queen. Uh-oh. Be careful. Always look at your opponent's moves, too. Bishop takes check, and now the game is starting to look a little bit reversed. Rook takes on d4, queen takes on c5. The game is about even here, computer's saying. Definitely not the best way to continue. All right, any other ideas, guys? All right, hopefully you saw it. Rook to d6, just trying to harass this queen and say, hey, stop trying to defend against this guy right here. Well, there's no really good move here. Black went ahead and just played queen to e8. Hopefully you guys can see why queen c7 was not a good move. After queen c7, what do you play? It's the same thing that happens in the regular game. All right, it was rook to d7, game over. Here, the pin is just too strong. Of course, queen can't take, because queen takes and rook can't take back because of the pin. And that's the exact same thing that happens in the game. After queen to e8 gets played, well, rook d7, and there's just no good way to defend against this piece. And you're probably going to be losing your queen here at some point pretty soon, too. Oof. A very, very nice game by Botvinnik. Remember, guys, learn how to play isolated pawn games. A lot of people are very fearful of them, even though they don't even know how to play them. I play them against a lot of strong masters, and I would never say that I've lost the game because of the isolated pawn. I've always pretty much lost because, my opponent's strong, right? With that being said, I have great games, and I've won against many other masters playing with the isolated pawn, and I highly encourage you to learn it. Even if you don't want to use it, it's good to know the rules so you can know, at least whenever you're playing against it, that how to take advantage of it or what are annoying ideas with it. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. We'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.